Why did everyone stop talking when she walked by? Maybe it was the way her boots barely made a sound on the gravel. Maybe it was because she didn't try to belong. The air at forward operating base Dagger was thin enough to scrape the lungs raw. Wind cut through the wire and bit its skin. The mountains rose around the outpost like jagged teeth, their peaks dusted white beneath a fatting orange sky. It wasn't a place for comfort. It was a place for endurance, and Specialist Anna Sharma understood endurance better than most. She stood near the HESCO barriers, watching the supply bird vanish into the distance, a C-130 dwindling to a silver cross against the darkening clouds. She didn't watch long, just long enough to measure the distance between her and the world she'd left behind. Then she turned back toward the cluster of tents and armored vehicles below, her shadow stretching long across the gravel. Behind her, voices rose, laughter, forced and rough. Soldiers, the kind who filled silence with noise because quiet made them think too much. She heard the rhythm of it, the pack hierarchy hidden inside their banter. They were mountain infantry, 1st Platoon, Bravo Company, men who had built pride out of altitude and pain. And like all closed circles, they had a way of testing anyone who tried to step inside. Look what the shuttle bird dropped off. The voice carried above the wind, deep and amused. Sergeant Rex Miller, they called him Bulldog. He was built like one, thick-necked, heavy-shouldered, his skin weathered by 100 unkind suns. A man who led with his voice first and his fists if that didn't work. He walked toward her with two of his usual satellites, Diaz and Chun, both trying too hard to look relaxed. Sharma turned to meet him. Her salute was sharp, precise, without hesitation. Specialist Sharma reporting for duty, Sergeant. Her voice was even, controlled. Miller looked her up and down, then let out a short grunt. Captain said we were getting another shooter. Guess the paperwork got confused. Logistics, huh? Yes, Sergeant. He smirked. Figures. They send us a bean counter to count the bullets we ain't fired yet. Hope you brought warm socks, Specialist. Gets cold up here for the support staff. Diaz chuckled. Chun followed. The laughter didn't sting her, it never did. It was predictable, like the way men puff their chests before a storm. She didn't reply. Her face stayed neutral, her posture still. The duffel hung from her right hand, the rifle from her left. She held the weapon like someone who knew its balance, not like someone afraid to. I'll find the quartermaster's tent, she said finally, tone flat, more a statement than a request. No, Miller corrected, jerking his thumb toward a squat structure near the perimeter. You'll find the female barracks, half of its storage so it should feel familiar, PT at 500, not 501, try to keep up. He turned before she could answer. Laughter followed him back into the compound. Sharma stood for a moment, letting the wind pull a strand of dark hair across her face. She tucked it beneath her patrol cap, adjusted the strap of her duffel, and moved. Her steps were even, measured. She didn't hurry. She never hurried. The weight of her pack, a solid 100 pounds, settled against her shoulders like a familiar ache. She welcomed it. The ache meant she was alive. Around her, the base came alive with the routines of dusk. The thump of a generator, the clang of metal against metal, the smell of oil and dust and sweat. It was all familiar, but it wasn't home. She didn't need it to be. Inside the small tent that passed for her quarters, she unpacked in silence. Each item had a place, each movement a purpose. When everything was squared away, she sat for a long moment on the edge of her cot, staring at her hands. They were small, the nails kept short, the skin rough from cold and years of work. The same hands that had held lives, carried weight, and done things no file would ever record. Sleep came late and shallow. At 4:30, she was already awake. The air was cold enough to bite her throat when she breathed. She tightened her boots, strapped on her rifle, and stepped out into the night. The base was still asleep except for a few guards at the wire. By 500, she was waiting on the gravel of the motor pool. The platoon was assembling, big men rubbing sleep from their eyes, cracking jokes, adjusting gear. She stood at the edge of the formation, silent, invisible. Sergeant Miller arrived last, a thermos of coffee in hand. "All right, ladies," he barked, voice booming. "Acclimatization run. 5 miles up the switchback to observation point Alpha and back. Standard pace. We don't leave anyone behind." He paused just long enough to let his gaze rest on her. A few of the men grinned. They knew the ritual, the new blood gets tested. No one noticed that Sharma's breathing was already steady, her muscles loose and ready. "Move out." The line of soldiers began its slow grind up the mountain. Within minutes, the wind turned sharp, filling their lungs with cold fire. The trail snaked upward, narrow and uneven, every breath stolen by altitude. By the first mile, the formation had stretched into fragments. The heavier men, the ones carved from weight room pride, began to fall back, their legs heavy, lungs burning. Sharma moved like a metronome, small steps, even rhythm, breath in, breath out. She passed Chun first. He gave her a glare between gasps, pride more wounded than body. Then Daya's, sweat freezing at his temples. Her pace never changed. Only Miller stayed ahead barely. He'd been running these trails for months. He knew the terrain, the switchbacks, the landmarks. But the quiet sound of her boots behind him, always the same distance, began to dig under his skin. He glanced back once. Her eyes were fixed on the path. Her expression didn't change. She wasn't racing him. She was just there, steady, patient, unrelenting. He pushed harder. His chest heaved, muscles screaming. The mountain didn't care. It punished pride and rewarded rhythm. By the time they reached the summit, his breaths came in ragged bursts. She reached the ledge seconds later, calm, the frost in her breath dissolving into stillness. The downhill was worse. Gravity did the hurting for them. Miller stumbled, half running to prove something no one was asking him to prove. Sharma followed with measured control, her steps sure on the loose stone. When they reached the base, he bent double, sucking air. She stood a few feet away, quiet, composed, sweat barely visible on her neck. The others trickled in one by one, some limping, others collapsing on the gravel. The laughter was gone now. Miller lifted his canteen, drank deeply, and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. His gaze swept over the men, tired, defeated, and landed on her again. Still upright, still calm. "You look a little hot, specialist," he said finally, his voice rough with mock humor. "Don't want you overheating on your first day." He tilted the canteen and poured. A full liter of icy mountain water cascaded over her head. The shock was instant. The cold sliced through her like a blade. Her shirt clung to her skin. Droplets streamed down her face and fell to the ground between her boots. The platoon froze. Someone chuckled, but it died quick. Sharma didn't move, she didn't flinch. She closed her eyes for one slow heartbeat, and when she opened them, something in her gaze had changed. The softness was gone. She set her rifle down, unclipped her pack, every motion deliberate, precise, as if she were disarming herself before surgery. Miller smirked. "What's the matter, specialist? Cat got your tongue." She stepped forward, one pace, then another. Her hand brushed his chest, light, almost gentle, and her other hand moved like a piston. The punch wasn't wide or wild. It was clean, vertical, powered by the full twist of her body. The sound it made wasn't loud, just a sharp, deep thud like air being crushed out of a drum. Miller folded. The breath shot from his lungs in a single strangled gasp. His knees hit gravel. For a second, his eyes were wide and blank, uncomprehending. Then he crumpled sideways, clutching his chest, trying to breathe and failing. Silence. Even the wind seemed to pause. Sharma stood over him, dripping, unmoving. Then she bent down, picked up her rifle, slung it over her shoulder, and walked away. No one said a word. It was Captain Rostova's voice that finally broke the stillness. "Sergeant Miller, Specialist Sharma, my office, now." The motor pool exhaled as they passed, one limping, one walking tall. Inside the captain's office, plywood walls, one humming heater, the silence was heavy. Rostova sat behind a cluttered desk, her eyes sharp and cold. "Sergeant," she said, voice quiet, "explain why you're on the ground and my new specialist looks like she's been waterboarded." Miller swallowed. "Accident, ma'am, slipped." "Don't lie to me," she cut in. "I saw it. You humiliated her. You embarrassed this unit." Her gaze shifted to Sharma. "And you, specialist, we don't solve problems with fists." "Yes, Captain," Sharma replied evenly. "He deserved it," Miller muttered, surprising even himself. "I was out of line." Rostova blinked once, then sighed. "Maybe so, but I'm still the one in charge of discipline. Miller, you're on latrine duty for a week, and you'll apologize to every man in this platoon." He nodded, pale, still struggling to breathe normally. "Dismissed." He left without a word. The captain turned to Sharma. "You're lucky I don't have you court-martialed." "I understand, Captain." Rostova studied her for a long moment. There was something unsettling about the calm. "Inventory duty," she said finally. "Every container on this base. Ammunition, rations, medical, 2 weeks. Alone, you'll sleep in the supply yard, clear." "Crystal, Captain." Sharma left the office with her head high. Rostova watched her go, a faint chill settling in her gut. She didn't know why. Maybe it was the eyes, cold, still, like the surface of deep water hiding something vast beneath. That night, as the wind moaned across the wire, the captain couldn't shake the feeling she'd made a mistake. She hadn't confined a soldier. She had caged something far more dangerous, and she had no idea what would happen when the cage door opened. Why did the silence feel heavier when she walked past? Even laughter dimmed around her now. The story of what happened in the motor pool had spread across FOB Dagger like wildfire carried by the mountain wind. 100 men had seen it. None would ever forget it. Sergeant Rex Miller, the bulldog who once led with his voice, was quieter these days. He did his latrine duty without protest. He carried buckets, scrubbed concrete, kept his head down. And every time he caught a glimpse of Specialist Sharma, his eyes dropped first. Respect sometimes arrives only after humiliation. She worked alone now in the far corner of the base, the supply yard. A graveyard of crates, rust-stained containers, and the endless sigh of wind through concertina wire. She moved through it like a ghost, clipboard in hand, every motion efficient, methodical. Counting ammunition, fuel drums, rations, spare parts. The punishment had become ritual. It suited her. Solitude never frightened her, it clarified things. At night, the others drank, played cards, tried to forget how fragile they were in a place like this. Sharma sat beside a dim lantern, reading maintenance logs, cleaning her weapon, or just listening. To the hum of the generator, to the way silence shifted before dawn. She found comfort in precision, because precision didn't judge. But the mountains have a way of testing every soul that sets foot on them. And their test was coming. It began with a drone feed. A grainy image in the operations tent, a cluster of rocks high in the Serpent's Tooth Pass. Beneath those rocks, heat signatures, equipment, possibly hostiles. If it was an enemy observation post, it overlooked their only supply route. Captain Rostova's voice was calm but clipped as she briefed her leaders around the flickering holographic map. The Serpent's Tooth is a 3-day round trip. Whether window is narrow, winds are already building. We confirm, we assess, we get out. No heroics. She paused. First platoon will take point. Miller straightened slightly. This was his chance to redeem himself. Bravo 16 is ready, Captain. 2 of your men are down, Rostova reminded him. Jenkins has altitude sickness. Rivera's knee is out. I need a 5-man team. The room fell silent. Then Diaz, of all people, spoke softly. What about Sharma? Miller's head snapped toward him. The clerk, no way. Chun, quiet but watching, said, She kept up with you on the run, Sarge, didn't even breathe hard. Rostova studied them both. Her instincts screamed no. But the clock was ticking, and the list of available names was short. Fine, she said at last, exhaling. She goes, but she carries the spare comms unit and extra medical supplies. She's your pack mule, Miller. You make sure she understands that. He saluted, jaw tight. Yes, ma'am. When he found her, she was buried waist-deep in a cargo container, labeling boxes of 5.56 rounds. The air smelled of dust and oil. Pack your gear, he said. You're coming with us. She didn't look up. Doing what, Sergeant? You're carrying extra weight, that's it. You stay quiet, you do as you're told. She made a final tick on her clipboard before meeting his eyes. I understand my role, Sergeant. An hour later they were stepping out of the wire, 5 figures against the rising light. The mountains loomed above, cold and endless. Captain Rostova watched from the command post window, unease gnawing at her. The wind already carried snow. She was sending them into the jaws of something that didn't forgive mistakes. The first day was all ascent. Rock and scree. Narrow ridgelines where one wrong step meant a 1,000-foot drop. The sun was a white glare reflecting off old snow. Miller led hard, pushing pace as if speed could erase shame. Diaz and Chun followed, breathing heavy. Sharma took the rear, the oversized pack dwarfing her frame, but her rhythm never faltered. Every step was deliberate, balanced. When they stopped for water, Diaz muttered, "Does she even get tired?" No one answered. By evening they reached a small defile, sheltered from the wind. The men dropped their packs with groans. Sharma, instead of resting, began a slow perimeter sweep. Eyes scanning ridges, ears tuned to wind shifts. "Relax, specialist," Miller called after her with a trace of mockery. "Enemy not climbing up here for a chat." She didn't reply. When she finished, she sat apart from them, unwrapping an MRE with careful precision. They joked quietly among themselves, their laughter dull against the sound of the mountain breathing around them. By morning the world had changed. The sky was pewter gray. The wind had a new voice, low at first, then rising, howling. Within an hour snow came. Not the lazy drift of flakes, but a hard, stinging storm that erased horizon and sound. "Push on," Miller shouted over the roar. "The pass is just ahead." It was a fatal misread. The storm wasn't a gust. It was a full-grown blizzard descending fast. Visibility dropped to nothing. The trail vanished under white fury. They became 5 shadows in a spinning void. "Sound off," Miller roared. "Miller." Diaz. Chun. Then a cry, a crash, the sickening sound of sliding rock. "Chun," Diaz shouted, scrambling toward the noise. They found him 20 feet below the trail, half buried in snow. His leg was twisted grotesquely, a bone piercing through torn fabric. Blood already darkening in the cold. Miller froze, his face went pale. All his strength, all his size, useless now. He just stared. "Don't move him," Sharma's voice cut through the storm like a scalpel. She slid down the slope, boots finding traction where none should exist. Her movements were calm, deliberate. The others hesitated, then followed her lead. She knelt beside Chun, hands moving with practiced precision. Scissors out, fabric cut clean. Assessment quick, compound fracture, heavy bleeding, shock onset. "Diaz," she said, "your IFAK, pressure dressing and morphine now." He fumbled it out, eyes wide, obeying without question. She worked fast, pressure applied, bleeding stemmed, morphine injected. Her tone stayed steady, low, anchoring him to reality. "This will help, Private. Breathe, stay with me." The wind screamed, but her voice stayed level. She looked up at Miller. "We need shelter now." He blinked, disoriented. There's nothing out here." There is, she interrupted, already scanning the white void. Her head turned, eyes narrowing, reading the subtle curve of snowdrifts, the pitch of the wind's echo. There, she pointed, rock overhang 50 meters, move. How can you possibly know? The wind lies, she said quietly, already moving. The snow doesn't. They half carried, half dragged Chun toward the direction she indicated. And there it was, just as she'd said. A shallow cave cut into the mountainside, invisible until you were nearly on top of it. Inside it was narrow but dry. They collapsed against the rock, breath burning in their throats. Daya's ISO blankets on Chun, she ordered. Miller, entrenching tool, we build a snow wall now. He hesitated, then handed her the tool. She showed them how to carve and stack blocks, how to seal gaps. In 30 minutes the wind's howl dulled to a low moan. Temperature rose by precious degrees. She moved again, efficient, clinical. Splint fashioned from trekking poles and webbing. Knots tied with surgeon's precision. Food and water rationed. 1 protein bar and half a liter every 12 hours, she declared. No exceptions. No one argued. The natural order had shifted. The clerk had become the commander. Hours passed, then a day. The blizzard raged outside, a living, screaming thing. Inside, they huddled under foil blankets. Sharma never stopped moving, checking vitals, forcing small stretches to keep circulation, whispering calm when panic crept in. By the second night, the storm began to fade. The silence after was deafening. She crawled to the snow wall, dismantled a small section and peered out. The world was transformed, endless white beneath a bruised gray sky. Then her body stilled. She raised a hand for silence. Less than 200 meters away, smoke curled from a rocky cluster. A narrow slit of dark, an enemy observation post. They stumbled right into its shadow. Miller crawled beside her, the old instinct returning. We can take them, he whispered. Daya's get eyes. No. Her voice was flat, final. He glared. That's the mission, specialist. The mission is survival, she said. We have 1 casualty, low ammo, almost no food. You attack, you die. He stared at her, anger rising, then ebbing. Because she was right. Daya's hands trembled slightly. So, what do we do? They'll find our tracks when they patrol. Sharma said nothing for a long moment. She was watching the smoke, the antenna, the placement of rocks. Her eyes were calculating, dissecting, learning. Binoculars, she said. Miller handed them over without a word. She lay flat in the snow, motionless, for 10 long minutes. When she returned, she spread a laminated map across the floor of the cave and began to draw. There are 4 of them, maybe 5. Machine gun here, sniper covering the ridge, patrol route every 2 hours. Her voice was calm, almost detached, but they have a blind spot. She tapped a narrow ravine behind the position. Snow-choked, steep, but out of their line of sight. It's our way home. Miller looked from the map to her face. How do you know all that from one look? She met his eyes, unblinking. Some places, she said softly, the wind teaches you more than a drill sergeant. For a long moment no one spoke. Even the storm outside seemed to hold its breath. He understood then. The perfect punch. The endurance. The survival instinct that bordered on supernatural. This woman wasn't who they'd been told she was. And for the first time in his career, Sergeant Rex Miller felt something unfamiliar. Not dominance. Not resentment. Just respect. Outside, the mountains waited. And somewhere above them, unseen in the swirling cold, the Kestrel had spread her wings again. How do you lead men who once mocked you, now clinging to you for survival? That was the quiet question circling Specialist Anna Sharma's mind as dawn broke over the mountains. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world carved from ice and silence. The sun rose weakly through a sheet of pale cloud, painting the snow in tones of silver and ash. Breath fogged instantly, and each exhale seemed to hang in the air before fatting. They survived the blizzard, barely. But now came the harder part, getting home alive. Inside the narrow rock shelter, the air was heavy with the smell of sweat, gun oil, and melted snow. Private Chun lay pale and motionless beneath layers of foil and fabric, his legs stabilized in a splint. Diaz dozed in a half-sitting position, his rifle balanced across his chest. Miller sat near the wall, staring at nothing, the lines of his face drawn tight by exhaustion and shame. Sharma crouched by the snow wall, peering through a small slit she'd left open for observation. Her movements were precise, quiet, controlled. She studied the enemy post in the distance, its angles, the rhythm of its smoke, the shadows of figures moving inside. Every detail mattered. The others watched her in silence. None dared interrupt. When she finally turned, her voice was calm. "They'll send a patrol soon. We move before then." "Move where?" Diaz asked, his voice rasping from thirst. "Through the ravine," she replied, pointing to the map she'd drawn across the cave floor. "Here. It's narrow but shielded. We'll drag Chun on a travois, make one from what's left of our gear." Miller frowned. "That's a mile of chest-deep snow, maybe worse. He'll freeze before we're halfway." "He'll die if we stay," she said. Her tone wasn't harsh, it was simply truth. "We move in 10. She started gathering materials: straps, sleeping pads, sections of carbon fiber poles. The men hesitated a moment before joining in. Even Miller, stripped of ego, followed her lead. They built the makeshift sled in silence, each movement accompanied by the low hiss of wind outside. When it was done, they lifted Chun onto it, wrapped him tight, and secured the lines. His eyes fluttered open. "Sorry," he whispered, barely audible. "Don't be," Sharma said softly. "You just focus on breathing." Then, without ceremony, she stepped into the snow and began to break trail. The first hour was slow torture. Every step plunged knee-deep, sometimes deeper. The cold was a living thing, clawing at fingers and faces. Breath came in ragged bursts, white ghosts against the endless white. Sharma moved at a relentless rhythm, cutting through drifts, her pack swaying with each step. The rope from the travois was wrapped around her waist. Miller and Diaz followed, dragging, grunting, straining against the weight of their wounded comrade. Time dissolved into monotony. Step, pull, breathe, repeat. After what felt like an eternity, they paused in the shadow of a ridge. Miller's gloves were stiff with ice. His shoulders trembled from fatigue. He looked at her, at this small, silent woman who never slowed. "How the hell are you still moving?" he muttered. She didn't answer. She just looked up the slope ahead, her eyes scanning the terrain, reading the land as if it spoke to her. Then she said quietly, "We're close." To the others, the mountain looked endless. To her, it had language. She read the direction of the wind, the subtle hollow of snowdrifts, the color of the ice crust, and she trusted her instincts like she trusted her heartbeat. They reached the mouth of the ravine by noon. It was narrower than expected, walls steep and dark, the snow inside untouched, deep as memory. Miller hesitated. "This is suicide." Sharma looked back at him. Her face was calm, lips slightly blue, eyes steady. "Only if we stop moving." And then she went first. The snow swallowed her up to the waist, but she kept going, step by measured step. Behind her, Miller and Diaz followed, dragging Chun carefully. The sled scraped and groaned, but it moved. Above them, somewhere unseen, a voice shouted, a sharp command in a foreign tongue. They froze. Sharma's head tilted slightly. She could hear boots crunching snow, faint but close, an enemy patrol moving along the ridge above them. "Down," she whispered. They pressed themselves against the ravine wall, hearts pounding. The sound of footsteps grew louder. They could make out shadows passing near the edge. Miller's fingers tightened around his rifle. Reflex. Sharma's hand reached out, resting lightly on his arm. A single silent command, "Don't." He obeyed. The patrol stopped, voices murmured, one laughed, then silence. Sharma's eyes darted upward, tracking movement. A loose pile of rocks sat near the edge of the slope, small, unstable. She picked up a single stone, smooth and cold, in her palm. Then, with a motion so fluid it barely seemed deliberate, she tossed it. The stone sailed through the snow-filled air and landed far down the ravine, clattering off rock. A cascade of powder followed, a soft avalanche echoing into the distance. Above, the voices snapped to alert, shouts, movement. The patrol shifted toward the noise, away from them. Miller exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Sharma didn't smile, she just whispered, "Move." They pressed on. Hours bled together until dusk. The world turned violet, the cold deepening into a kind of silence that hurt to breathe. The rope around Sharma's waist cut into her sides. Her legs shook with fatigue, but she didn't falter. When the sky finally darkened to indigo, she stopped. "We rest here." They collapsed into the snow, forming a shallow pit for shelter. Miller lay back, staring up at the faint shimmer of stars through the haze. He'd been a soldier for 15 years. He'd seen combat, loss, fear, but he'd never seen endurance like this. Not in any man, not in himself. He turned to look at her. This quiet specialist who had dismantled his pride, survived a blizzard, and now led them through hell. She was kneeling beside Chun, checking his pulse, whispering something calm and steady. Not once did she show fear. He realized with a strange heaviness that he didn't even know who she really was. Somewhere far below them, back at FOB Dagger, Captain Rostova was fighting her own battle, with guilt. The patrol was now 48 hours overdue. The storm had destroyed all comms. The mountains had swallowed her people whole. She hadn't slept in 2 days. Her uniform was rumpled, her coffee cold, her mind a storm of self-reproach. In desperation, she began digging through personnel files. Anything that might help her guess where they'd gone, who they were, what kind of people she might have lost. Miller's record was standard. Diaz's average, Chun, rookie but competent. Then she reached Sharma. The file was strange. Too clean, too brief. Basic training, perfect. AIT, perfect. No disciplinary notes, no citations, no deployments of note. A ghost career. And then she saw it, at the bottom of the page, a note in gray font. Full service record classified. Level 4 clearance required. Her pulse spiked. Rostova had level 4 clearance. She keyed in her access code. The screen flickered, new text appeared. And what she read made her skin crawl. Name: Anya Sharma. Designation: Operator, 7th Special Operations Group, Detachment Sierra. Specialization: High-altitude warfare, unconventional reconnaissance. SEER: Survival, Evasion, Resistance, Escape, Instructor. Status: Reassigned for decompression after mission compromise. Codename Kestrel. The report went on. Graduate of Mountain Warfare School, Special Forces Sniper Course, Halo qualified, Winter Palace program, top of class. Rostova's breath caught. Winter Palace. She'd heard the name whispered before. A black site training ground buried in the Alaskan range. The kind of place where soldiers either became legends or never came out at all. She scrolled further. Mission: Parnier Range classified, team of 4. Result: compromised. Sole survivor, Operator Kestrel, evaded capture for 21 days, self-recovered, psychological decompression recommended. Rostova leaned back, the chair creaking beneath her. Her throat felt dry. They hadn't sent her a logistics specialist. They sent her a weapon disguised as one. She'd punished that weapon, locked it in a supply yard, and then sent it into the mountains under the command of a man who once dumped water on her head. God help them, she whispered. Her voice shook as she reached for the radio. This is Captain Rostova to Air Wing Command. Begin search over the Serpent's Tooth. Focus on ravines and dead zones. That's where she'd go. That's where Kestrel would go. Outside, the wind howled around the base. But the captain's eyes were fixed on the map, on the glowing mark that represented the patrol's last known position. She prayed the mountain hadn't claimed them yet. Up in that frozen world, the small convoy moved again through the ravine, each step bringing them closer to the valley floor. Their strength was almost gone. Miller stumbled more than once, his breath wheezing. Diaz's lips were cracked and bleeding. Chun drifted in and out of consciousness. Sharma's pace slowed, but her focus never wavered. She seemed carved from the same rock they were trying to escape. When the sun began to fade behind the peaks, she called for another halt. The group sank into exhaustion, too tired even to speak. Miller turned his head slightly toward her. His voice was a rasp. "Who are you?" She didn't look at him. "Nobody." But her eyes, staring into the distance, betrayed a different truth, one she would never give voice to. Because Kestrel didn't belong to a name anymore. She belonged to survival. And tonight, survival was the only mission that mattered. How far can the human body go before it breaks? For Specialist Anna Sharma, that answer had always been farther. Now the mountains demanded proof. By dawn, their world was colorless. The snow had settled into a thick crust that glittered beneath the half-light. The ravine stretched endlessly, twisting between jagged rock faces that loomed like the ribs of a fossilized beast. Wind whispered through them, carrying flakes that burned against skin. Miller trudged behind her, shoulders hunched, his breath a visible fog of struggle. Every pull on the rope that dragged Chun's travois felt like fire in his chest. Diaz limped beside him, lips cracked, face pale. The silence between them was thick, sacred, the silence of men too tired to pretend anymore. Sharma led the way. Each step was measured, deliberate, unhurried. Her small frame carved a steady path through snow that swallowed her up to the thighs. The rope at her waist tugged at her ribs with every pull, but she didn't flinch. Her rhythm never changed. The men had stopped seeing her as a woman, or as a logistics specialist. She was something else now, a force of motion, a quiet current that refused to stop. "Rest," Miller croaked finally, his voice hoarse. Sharma turned, scanning the terrain. She saw a cluster of dark rocks half buried in snow and nodded. 10 minutes. No fire, no noise. They collapsed, gasping, steam rising from their backs. Diaz leaned against his rifle. "I can't feel my fingers." "Good," Sharma said softly. "Means you still have them." He gave a shaky laugh that died quickly in the cold. "You ever done this before?" Her eyes flicked toward him, the kind of look that was both an answer and a warning. "Once or twice." She turned away before he could ask more. Above them, the sky was thickening again, darker clouds rolling in from the west. The mountain wasn't done with them. Miller shifted his weight, pain etched across his face. "We're not gonna make it before nightfall." Sharma studied him for a moment. There was no contempt in her gaze, only calculation. "Then we move faster." She tightened the rope around her waist, nodded to Diaz, and stepped forward again. The rope strained, snow crunched, they moved. Each minute felt like a small eternity. Their breath became shallow, vision tunneling. But step by step, the ravine began to widen, the slope angling downward toward a long stretch of frozen basin. Then the sound came, faint but unmistakable. Engines. The low, guttural hum of something mechanical moving over snow. Sharma froze. Miller looked up sharply. "What the?" "Down," she hissed. They dropped flat against the ice, just as a pair of headlights cut through the gloom, faint beams sweeping the far edge of the basin. A snowcat, armored, crawling slowly across the ridge. 2 figures stood in its open hatch, scanning with thermal goggles. Enemy patrol. The noise rolled through the valley, bouncing off stone. Then, as quickly as it came, it faded into distance, but not far enough. "They're sweeping for heat," Sharma whispered. "They'll double back." "What do?" Diaz's voice trembled. "We disappear." In the next instant, she was moving, unclipping the ropes, scanning the terrain for shadows. Her eyes landed on a slope to their right, half covered in snow and ice. "There," she said, pointing. "Avalanche drift, dense enough to hold weight, loose enough to dig." "You want us to hide in that?" Miller rasped. "You want to be seen." That ended the discussion. They dug with numb hands and entrenching tools, carving a shallow hollow into the snowbank. They pulled Chun in, covered the opening with gear, draped it with a thermal blanket, then snow. Within minutes, they were entombed in dim blue light. The air inside grew stale and heavy. No one spoke. Only the faint rasp of breathing filled the cramped shelter. Outside, the sound returned, engines closer now, voices, boots crunching over snow. Miller's heartbeat pounded in his ears. He tightened his grip on his rifle, every muscle rigid. Diaz closed his eyes, whispering a prayer under his breath. Sharma didn't move. Her breathing was slow, controlled. She listened, counting footsteps, tracking positions by sound. The voices stopped. For a long, unbearable moment, there was nothing. Then a heavy crunch directly above them. Snow sifted down from the ceiling, cold against their faces. Someone was standing right over the drift. Miller's jaw clenched, sweat mingled with frost on his brow. The man above shifted, muttered something in a foreign tongue. Then a metallic clank, the sound of a lighter. Through the thin snow barrier, Sharma saw a faint orange glow. A cigarette. The enemy soldier was standing on top of their shelter, smoking casually, unaware that 5 heartbeats thudded beneath his boots. The ember flared, faded. Seconds stretched into minutes. Finally, the sound of boots moved away. Voices called out. The engine started again. The snowcat rumbled off, its sound growing smaller, swallowed by the mountain. Only then did Sharma move. She exhaled slowly, then pushed upward, cracking through the thin layer of snow. Cold air rushed in. "Clear," she whispered. The others crawled out one by one, gasping, their faces pale and slick with sweat. Miller looked at her, a long, silent stare that carried something deeper than words. Gratitude, shame, awe. She adjusted her pack. "We move." The march resumed. Back at FOB Dagger, Captain Rostova hadn't left the operations tent in 30 hours. The radio chatter was a constant hum, but none of it brought what she needed: confirmation. The blizzard had finally eased, allowing drones to resume scanning. On the monitor, a feed flickered, the ridges of the serpent's tooth, ghostly and immense. No heat signatures, no movement. She sipped cold coffee and stared at the map until her eyes burned. Then the door flapped open. A young intel officer stepped in, breathless. "Ma'am," one of the search drones picked up something in the southern basin. Faint IR spikes, looks like movement. Her head snapped up. "Coordinates." He handed her a tablet. Grid 73 by 52 could be them. Rostova's pulse surged. "Or could be hostiles." "Possible, ma'am, but one of the signals is static, low and constant, like a distress beacon." "Patch me into Air Wing Command," she ordered, rising to her feet. "Get a bird ready to scramble. If it's them, I want eyes on in 5. As the officer hurried out, she stared at the glowing coordinates. Somewhere out there, beyond the walls, beyond the screaming wind, her soldiers were still fighting to come home. And one of them, the quiet one, might just be the reason any of them were still breathing. The next 12 hours blurred into a single stretch of survival. Sharma and her team moved through the valley floor, keeping to the shadows of ridges and frozen riverbeds. They rationed the last of their food, crumbs and meltwater. Every muscle ached, every breath burned. But they kept moving. By evening, the wind returned, carrying the faint hiss of snow. They found temporary shelter in the lee of a large boulder. Miller collapsed first, sinking to his knees. He'd been quiet most of the day, saving breath for movement. Now his voice came rough, low. "You could have left us, back in the cave when the storm hit. You could have just walked away." Sharma didn't answer. She was staring at the horizon, where the peaks met a wall of cloud. "No one gets left behind." Miller managed a weak laugh. "That sounds like doctrine." "It's not doctrine," she said quietly. "It's debt." He frowned. "Debt?" She didn't look at him. Her voice was distant, almost mechanical. "A long time ago I lost 3 people on a mountain not unlike this one. Same cold, same sky. I promised myself I wouldn't let it happen again." Diaz looked up. "You were in special forces, weren't you?" The silence that followed was its own answer. Sharma adjusted the strap on her rifle, her eyes still fixed on the peaks. "Labels don't matter. What matters is we finish what we start." Miller swallowed hard. "You really think we'll make it?" She turned to him then, and for the first time there was softness in her gaze. "You will." The wind picked up, scattering fine snow across their faces. In the distance, the faint, rhythmic thump of helicopter blades began to echo through the canyons. They froze. Miller's eyes widened. "You hear that?" She nodded. "Stay low." A Black Hawk appeared like a dark silhouette against the fading light, its rotors slicing through mist. It was circling, searching. Diaz grabbed his flare. "We can signal." "Not yet," Sharma snapped. "They'll see us and so will the enemy." She scanned the ridgeline and there it was. Movement. Tiny shapes emerging from the rocks near the old observation post. The enemy was on the hunt, drawn by the same sound. 2 forces converging. Her mind raced. The helicopter was still a mile out, too far to recognize them. She ripped open her pack, pulled out the spare comms unit she'd been hauling for 3 days. The casing was cracked from the cold, the battery half dead. She toggled through channels, found an emergency frequency, and keyed the mic. "This is Bravo 16, she said. Her voice was calm but urgent. "Friendly survivors, 4 personnel, 1 casualty. Coordinates," she rattled them off from memory. "Request immediate extraction. Hostile presence near grid 73 by 52. Over." Static then. "Copy that, Bravo 16, a voice crackled. "Visual not confirmed, stand by for flare ID." Miller looked at her, she nodded once. "Now." Diaz fired the flare. A red comet tore into the sky, painting the snow crimson. The Black Hawk banked, turning toward them. Then the world erupted. A single rifle shot cracked through the valley, echoing off stone. The flare spun wildly, fading out. "Contact," Miller shouted. Bullets hissed into the snow, throwing up white plumes. Sharma dropped flat, eyes scanning. She saw the muzzle flash on the ridge, 300 meters out. "Diaz, cover left. Miller, get Chun behind that rock," she commanded, already rolling to her stomach, rifle up. Her breathing slowed, her world narrowed. She squeezed the trigger once, precise, deliberate. The muzzle flash vanished. Another figure moved. She shifted 2 inches, adjusted wind and dropped by instinct, fired again. Silence. Then another shot from their side this time. Miller's rifle barked twice. The valley went still. The Black Hawk roared overhead, the downdraft whipping snow into a frenzy. A spotlight cut through the white haze, sweeping until it caught them. Sharma shielded her eyes as the medic team rappelled down, moving fast. Chun was hoisted first, then Diaz. Miller stumbled toward the line, half frozen, his breath coming in ragged bursts. When it was her turn, she hesitated, looking back once at the mountains. The peaks loomed like silent sentinels, cold and vast. Then she hooked in, and the winch pulled her skyward. Below, the valley disappeared beneath a veil of snow. In the helicopter's cabin, the sound was deafening, rotors, wind, heartbeats. No one spoke. Miller sat hunched, his hands shaking, his face streaked with dirt and awe. Diaz leaned his head back, eyes closed, whispering something like a prayer. Across from them, Sharma sat still, rifle resting between her knees, eyes distant. Outside, the mountains faded into darkness. They were going home. But something in her knew she'd never really left this kind of place. Because for people like her, the war never stopped. It just changed shape. How do you salute someone the system taught you to underestimate? That question hung in Captain Rostova's mind as the Blackhawk's rotors thundered against the mountain wind. The flight line at FOB Dagger was a chaos of noise and movement, medics running, floodlights cutting through snow flurries, ground crews shouting over the roar of blades. The downwash flattened the dust into blinding swirls as the helicopter settled onto the pad. The side door slid open. The first to emerge was Diaz, staggering slightly as his boots hit the gravel. Then Miller, pale, trembling, his uniform stiff with frost. Behind them, the medics pulled out the stretcher bearing Chun, his leg wrapped in blood-stained bandages but still there, still alive. And finally, Sharma. She stepped down from the aircraft, her movements deliberate, calm. The rotor wash tore at her soaked uniform, whipping strands of black hair across her face. She didn't flinch. Her eyes, dark and unreadable, scanned the familiar shapes of the base. She was back in the world of noise and hierarchy and pretense, and she didn't seem relieved. Rostova walked forward, her expression stone. She stopped directly in front of the woman she'd sent to die. For a long moment, neither spoke. The wind howled through the wire, carrying grit and memory. The floodlights caught the sheen of frost on Sharma's face, the quiet exhaustion, the kind that sits behind the eyes. Rostova raised her hand slowly, deliberately, and rendered a formal salute. It was not the automatic, perfunctory gesture of rank. It was something else, a recognition, a reckoning. Sharma hesitated, then returned it with a crisp, perfect motion. The moment passed. "Get them to the infirmary," Rostova ordered, her voice sharp to mask the tremor beneath it. "I want debriefs at 600. She turned and walked away before her face could betray what she felt. Because guilt has a way of wearing a uniform too. The night stretched thin across the base. Generators hummed. The mountains loomed black and indifferent beyond the wire. Inside the command tent, Rostova sat alone. The heater rattled quietly beside her desk. A single lamp cast a pool of yellow light over the scattered folders. In front of her lay the opened file, Kestrel, the classified report that had turned her understanding upside down. She'd read it 5 times. It didn't get easier. The mission logs, the names of the team that hadn't come back, the notes stamped across the final page, administrative reassignment for decompression. They hadn't sent her a specialist. They sent her a survivor. And she had punished that survivor for defending herself. Rostova leaned forward, elbows on her knees, hands clasped tight until her knuckles whitened. The sound of the storm outside felt almost personal, a reminder of her own failure to see. "Captain," the voice broke the quiet. She looked up. Sergeant Miller stood in the doorway, still in his frostbitten uniform, his cap clutched in one hand. His face was gaunt, his eyes haunted. "Permission to speak freely, ma'am." "Granted," she said softly. He stepped closer, standing in the lamplight. "You should know she saved us, all of us. Chun would have died the first night if it weren't for her." Rostova nodded slowly. "I know." He swallowed. "No, ma'am, you don't. I've been in this army 15 years. I thought I understood what makes a good soldier, strength, noise, presence. I was wrong." He took a breath, his voice trembling. "That woman carried us through a blizzard, found shelter where there was nothing, fought off a patrol with half her strength gone. She never complained, never once looked scared. I was the one who broke, not her." He stared at the ground, shame pressing on his shoulders like weight. "I dumped water on her head in front of everyone. I called her a clerk. She could have left me up there. She didn't. Rostova's eyes softened. What do you want me to say, Sergeant? He looked up. That you'll make sure she doesn't disappear into another file. Rostova's jaw tightened. That's not up to me. It should be, he said quietly. Then he nodded, saluted, and walked out. The flap closed behind him, leaving her alone again, alone with the wind, the guilt, and the weight of secrets. Elsewhere on the base, Sharma sat in the small maintenance bay, the same one where she had spent her first night. The walls were bare metal, the light harsh and unforgiving. Her rifle lay disassembled across an ammo crate, cleaning rods, patches, solvent, the same ritual as always. She worked in silence, each motion precise, mechanical. The rhythmic click of metal parts echoed like a heartbeat. The smell of CLP hung in the air. Across from her, the second mug of coffee grew cold, untouched. She wasn't thinking about the mission. Not the blizzard, not the blood, not the look on Miller's face when he realized what she was. She was thinking about the promise she'd made long ago, in another place, to 3 names now carved into a black wall in her memory. Never again. She tightened the bolt carrier group, the final piece clicking home with satisfying precision. Footsteps approached. She didn't look up until she heard the soft voice behind her. Specialist Sharma. It was Rostova. The captain stood in the doorway, hands clasped behind her back, her expression unreadable. Sharma rose immediately, spine straight, eyes forward. Ma'am. At ease. The captain stepped closer. The silence stretched. Only the hum of the light filled the space. You're not who they said you were, Rostova said finally. Sharma's expression didn't change. No, ma'am. I read the file, the real one. I figured you would. Rostova exhaled. They should have told me, I should have known. It wouldn't have changed anything. Wouldn't it? Sharma met her gaze. You still would have punished me, maybe not for the punch but for what it meant. Rostova frowned. And what did it mean? Sharma hesitated. Then, softly, it meant I wasn't going to take it anymore. The words hung there, quiet, dangerous, honest. Rostova nodded slowly, the tension in her face easing into something that looked like sorrow. I misjudged you. You're not the first, Sharma said, and you won't be the last. The captain studied her for a long moment, then stepped closer. You know, when I got your orders, I thought you were a mistake. I thought someone in personnel had sent me the wrong file. I didn't realize you were the kind of soldier the system hides when it doesn't know what to do with them. Sharma's voice softened. The system hides what it can't fix. And you? I wasn't broken, she said quietly, just tired. The heater clicked off. The silence that followed felt almost warm. Rostova sighed. They'll write this up as a successful recon gone wrong. They'll put medals in boxes and call it leadership. But the truth is, you saved them. You saved me from sending 4 more names home in caskets. Sharma looked down at her hands, still faintly trembling from the cold. It wasn't heroism, it was necessity. The captain smiled faintly. You always this humble. Real heroes don't come home. Rostova's throat tightened. For a moment, the captain and the soldier were just 2 women standing in a room full of ghosts. Then Rostova reached into her pocket and placed something on the crate, a single patch. The emblem of the 7th Special Operations Group, faded but intact. I pulled it from your restricted file, she said. Thought it should belong to you again. Sharma stared at it for a long moment, then shook her head. That life over. Maybe, Rostova said softly, but some things don't end. They just wait for you to remember who you are. The wind outside rattled the tin walls. Sharma picked up the patch, her thumb brushing over the stitched wings of the Kestrel. For the first time since the storm, her composure cracked just slightly. A breath that trembled, eyes that glimmered before she blinked it away. Rostova turned toward the door. Get some rest, specialist. You'll have visitors tomorrow. Commands coming up from base. They'll want your version of events." Sharma nodded. "Yes, ma'am." The captain paused in the doorway. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry." Then she was gone. Sharma stood in the dim light for a long time after. The heater kicked back on, filling the silence with its low hum. She pinned the patch to the inside of her duffel, near the seam hidden but there. Then she sat back down, rechecked her rifle and whispered to no one. Never again. Outside, the storm had cleared. The stars shone cold and bright above the dark peaks. In the barracks, Diaz dreamed of the storm, of hands pulling him from snow. In the infirmary, Chun slept beneath a blanket, the painkillers softening his memories. And in her quarters, Captain Rostova stared out her window at the same mountains, wondering how many soldiers under her command were ghosts the system had simply forgotten. Somewhere out there, among those peaks, the wind carried a sound that could almost have been wings. And maybe, if anyone had listened close enough, they might have sworn the mountain was whispering a name. The Kestrel. What happens when truth doesn't fit the report? That question would echo through the walls of FOB Dagger long after the storm ended. The brass arrived at noon. 2 black transports touched down in perfect formation, engines whining in the thin mountain air. The insignia on their sides gleamed beneath the winter sun. Department of Defense, Tactical Oversight Division. A delegation of suits and officers stepped out, crisp and untouched by frost or fatigue. Their boots were too clean for this place. They came not for rescue, but for answers. Inside the command tent, Captain Rostova stood behind her desk, her jaw set. Beside her sat Specialist Anna Sharma, silent, steady, uniform immaculate, eyes calm but unreadable. Across from them, Colonel Marin, the kind of man who measured morality by protocol, flipped through the mission report like it was a stack of meaningless numbers. His voice was even, clipped, surgical. 4 days missing, 1 man wounded, no enemy bodies recovered, no drone footage. And yet we have, he paused, scanning the page, an account of hostile engagement, survival, and unverified combat contact. He looked up, his gaze narrowing on Sharma. "Operator, you expect us to believe that?" Her tone was level. "No, sir." The colonel blinked. "Excuse me. I don't expect belief, sir, just accuracy." The room went still. Rostova's mouth twitched, the faintest ghost of a smile she quickly hid. The colonel set the file down. "Operator Sharma, your personnel record was sealed for a reason. You were assigned to this post as a logistics advisor, not a combat element. Yet your commanding officer reports multiple instances of independent tactical decision-making, including engagement without authorization." "Yes, sir." "And you see no issue with that?" Sharma's voice didn't waver. "Sir, with respect, authorization isn't worth much when the radio's dead and your team's dying." Marin's eyes hardened. "That's not your call." She met his stare evenly. "It was at the time." A silence followed, the kind that bends air. Rostova spoke then, her tone measured. "Colonel, with respect, her actions saved 3 lives. The team returned because of her decisions. You'd be holding a memorial, not a debrief, if she hadn't taken command." Marin turned his cold gaze toward her. "Captain, the chain of command exists for a reason." "And so does instinct," she said, "the kind you don't teach in a briefing room." He studied her for a long moment, then closed the folder with a quiet snap. "We'll review this incident. Operator Sharma, you're temporarily relieved of field duties pending evaluation. Psychological and physical assessments will begin at 600. You'll remain on base until further notice." "Yes, sir," Sharma said simply. The colonel turned to leave, his entourage following like shadows. When the tent flap closed behind them, Rostova exhaled slowly, like a diver surfacing after too long underwater. "Evaluation," she muttered. "They mean containment." Sharma was already standing, hands clasped behind her back, posture perfect. "They mean observation, ma'am. They want to know if I broke." Rostova looked at her. "Did you?" Sharma's eyes softened. "I'm still here." And with that she walked out. That evening the sky turned molten, streaks of orange fire cutting across the snow peaks. The world looked like it was burning, but silently. Sharma sat alone on the edge of the perimeter, where the concertina wire met the frozen valley. The wind tugged at her hair, carrying the faint smell of kerosene from the generators. She spent the day answering questions, medical tests, mental evaluations, a carousel of professionals trying to dissect her humanity with clipboards. "Any flashbacks?" "No." "Do you feel remorse?" "For what?" "Do you think you're better than standard personnel?" "No, just different." They scribbled notes and watched her eyes like predators waiting for weakness. Now she just sat, watching the sky die. Footsteps approached behind her, slow, uneven. Couldn't sleep either. She turned slightly. Miller, wrapped in a field jacket 2 sizes too big, limping on a half-healed leg. "Should be resting," she said. He smirked faintly. "Doc says the same. I told her I'd rest when I stop hearing wind in my head." She gave a small nod. "That might take a while." He came closer, standing beside her. For a while they just watched the sunset, the way it bled across the horizon like something refusing to fade. "You know," he said finally, "they asked me during my debrief if I felt manipulated. Said you might have used conditioning on us. Psychological dominance, they called it." Sharma didn't react. "And what did you say?" "I told them we followed you because we wanted to live." A faint smile ghosted her lips. "That's not dominance, that's trust." He looked at her then, really looked, at the quiet strength, the way her jawline caught the dying light, the lines of exhaustion beneath her eyes that no metal could erase. "I used to think leadership was about rank," he said, "about who shouts the loudest. Turns out it's about who walks first into the dark." She didn't answer, but her silence was agreement enough. The wind shifted, the cold deepened. Miller pulled something from his pocket, a crumpled piece of fabric. He held it out to her. It was a patch, the same one she'd left behind in the snow. "I figured you'd want this back," he said quietly. Her fingers brushed his as she took it. The fabric was frayed, still smelling faintly of smoke and frost. "Thank you," she said softly. "Don't thank me," he said. "Just don't disappear again." She turned her eyes back to the horizon. "You can't disappear when you were never supposed to exist." He didn't know how to answer that. After a moment he said, "You're not going to fight them, are you? The brass?" She shook her head. "No point, they don't hate me. They fear what I remind them of." "What's that?" "That control is a myth," she said, "and survival doesn't salute anyone." The wind whispered through the wire. Somewhere far below, the valley glimmered like liquid glass. Miller turned to leave but paused. "You know, ma'am, about that punch. I deserved worse." A small, tired laugh escaped her. "You did." He grinned. "Guess we're even then." She didn't look at him, but her eyes softened. "Get some rest, Sergeant." He nodded and walked away, his figure fading into the dusk. She sat there long after, the patch clenched in her hand, the wind humming against the fence like an old song. Inside the operations center, Colonel Marin watched the night footage from the drone feed, thermal signatures flickering over mountain terrain. Sharma's unit, the footprints, the dead zones. He zoomed in on one clip, faint heat readings clustered near a ravine later overrun by enemy patrols. He frowned. "Get me field intel. I want confirmation those patrols were insurgent, not local militia." A young analyst hesitated. "Sir, there's something else." Marin looked up. The analyst swallowed. "We pulled satellite data from the fourth night. There's an anomaly. A heat plume, human-sized, moving uphill during the blizzard, away from the team." Marin leaned forward. Away. Yes, sir, toward an enemy observation point. The timing matches just before their extraction. The colonel's brow furrowed. You're saying she left them? Not exactly. The next scan shows a second plume, larger, retreating downhill 15 minutes later, like it was chasing her. Marin stared at the screen. She drew them off. The analyst nodded. Looks that way, sir. For a long moment, Marin said nothing. Then he straightened. Erase that segment from the official brief. The analyst froze. Sir. You heard me. It never happened. Yes, sir. The colonel turned off the monitor, the glow fading from his face. He stood there for a while, staring into the dark window, his own reflection staring back. Because some truths don't fit in after-action reports. Later that night, Rostova found Sharma back in the maintenance bay, packing her duffel. They're moving you out, she asked. Reassignment, Sharma said simply, temporary. Rostova folded her arms. You think they'll bury this? They'll try. The captain studied her, this woman who looked small and ordinary but had walked through the kind of silence that kills weaker minds. Where will they send you? Sharma shrugged. Where I'm useful or where I'm forgotten. Does it matter to you? She zipped the duffel closed, then looked up, and for a heartbeat the mask slipped. It used to. Now I just go where the quiet is loud enough to hear myself think. Rostova nodded slowly. You've earned more than that. Sharma smiled faintly. No one earns peace, ma'am. We just borrow it between wars. The captain didn't know what to say, so she didn't. They stood in silence until the lights flickered, a power fluctuation in the storm. For a moment, everything went dark except for the pale shimmer of moonlight through the cracked door. And in that moment, Rostova saw her not as a subordinate or a soldier or a name on a file, but as a living reminder that some people are built from something unteachable. When the lights returned, Sharma was already shouldering her pack. Take care of them, she said. Of who? The ones who still believe this job is about orders. Then she stepped into the cold. The helicopter came before dawn. No ceremony, no witnesses, just a whisper of rotor blades and a shadow crossing over the base. She climbed aboard without looking back. Inside, the pilot handed her a sealed folder marked with her name and a single line of text, Directive, Black Root. She didn't open it, she didn't have to. Through the small window, she watched the base shrink below, the lights of FOB Dagger fading into the endless white of the mountains. And as the sun began to rise, a pale gold cutting across the peaks, a thought crossed her mind like a quiet truth she didn't need to say aloud. Sometimes the real battles aren't fought in snow or blood. They're fought in silence, against what the world thinks you are. Where do they send the soldiers who know too much, yet speak too little? For Anna Sharma, the answer came in the shape of an envelope stamped Black Root. The chopper flew her east into a dawn that looked more like ash than light. Clouds rolled beneath the rotors like an ocean of gray. She didn't ask where they were going. She didn't need to. She recognized the flight pattern, the silence of the crew, the lack of insignia on their uniforms. When the mountains gave way to desert, she knew. Somewhere near the borderlands, an unmarked facility built from sand and silence. A place where operations began without names and ended without witnesses. The helicopter touched down inside a walled compound of concrete and dust. Heat hit her like a memory. The air tasted metallic, burnt. She stepped out, boots crunching gravel. Two soldiers escorted her through steel doors into a hallway lined with white light and shadows. At the end waited a man in plain fatigues, sleeves rolled, expression unreadable. Operator Sharma, he said, offering no rank. Welcome back. She studied him. His face was vaguely familiar, the kind of face you remember from briefings you weren't supposed to attend. Don't remember your name, she said quietly. That's the point. He motioned her toward a small room with a single table. On it lay a file, thin and clean. You're being reinstated to active black service. Temporary assignment. Duration undisclosed. Sharma didn't sit, and the task. Observation, he said, simple. She didn't smile. Observation never is. He opened the file. Inside, grainy photos. Satellite images of a desert valley, a convoy of vehicles, and a compound that looked civilian at first glance. Local intelligence suspects weapons trafficking. We want confirmation before we move. You'll embed with a recon team under civilian cover. Record, report, extract. No engagement. No engagement, she repeated, voice flat. He met her eyes. Unless necessary. That clause, unless necessary, had justified everything from assassinations to disappearances. She nodded once. When do we leave? Tomorrow. He handed her a folder of clearance documents. You'll be under the name Anya Dev, civilian contractor. Keep it clean. She took it, scanning the papers without emotion. And when it's over. His gaze flickered. We'll talk. She turned to leave, but paused at the door. You're not sending me there because of logistics or recon, are you? He tilted his head. Why do you think we're sending you? Her voice was quiet, cold. Because I survived when I wasn't supposed to. He didn't deny it. That night she lay on the thin bunk in her assigned quarters, staring at the ceiling. The room was silent except for the hum of the ventilation. Sleep didn't come easily anymore. It never did after a mission that wasn't supposed to exist. She thought of the mountains, of the endless white, of Miller's broken voice, of Rostova's quiet guilt. The memories were already fading, turning into static like everything else. She reached into her duffel, fingers brushing over the old patch, the Kestrel wings, still frayed. She hadn't sewn it back on her uniform. It didn't belong there anymore. The Kestrel didn't perch, it hunted. By dawn she was ready. The convoy moved at sunrise, 3 unmarked vehicles cutting across an expanse of shifting dunes. The desert was a living thing, breathing heat and silence. Sharma sat in the back seat of the lead truck, gear bag at her feet, eyes hidden behind polarized lenses. The others with her, a small recon team, 2 men and 1 woman, chatted softly over the engine's hum. They didn't know who she was, just another civilian specialist, quiet and detached. The driver, Corporal Reyes, glanced at her in the mirror. First time out here. Sharma's lips curved slightly, something like that. He chuckled. Don't worry, nothing happens in this wasteland. It's just sun and boredom. She said nothing. Her gaze drifted to the horizon, where mirage and sky melted together. She learned long ago that nothing was ever just boredom. Quiet always meant something was coming. They reached the observation ridge by midday, a series of rocky escarpments overlooking a wide valley. Below, faint outlines of structures shimmered in the heat. They set up equipment, scopes, signal relays, long-range mics. The air vibrated with heat haze. Sharma knelt beside the ridge, scanning the compound through the optics. She noted vehicles, movement patterns, the glint of metal in the shade. Too organized for civilians, too quiet for smugglers. See anything? Reyes asked, chewing on a piece of gum. Not yet, she murmured, but the quiet's wrong. He grinned. You sound like an old-timer. She didn't correct him. As the sun sank, the desert transformed. The heat faded into a bone-deep chill. The horizon bled orange and crimson. Long shadows crawled across the sand like slow-moving ghosts. That's when she saw it, a shimmer barely perceptible at the compound's far edge. A vent, heat escaping. Sublevel, she whispered. Reyes frowned. You sure? Positive. She adjusted the scope, magnified the image. The ground seemed to ripple just slightly, as if air itself was warping. Infrared would confirm it. She toggled her handheld. The screen lit up in shades of blue and red. There it was, a tunnel, hidden beneath the sands. Got you, she murmured. She keyed the mic. Observation to command. Confirmed sublevel thermal anomaly at grid 195 by 721. Possible underground structure. Static, then a clipped response. Copy that, Dev. Hold position until further instruction. Copy. She lowered the mic. Something in the tone of that response itched at her nerves. Too clean, too rehearsed. Night fell fast. They rotated shifts, the others eating ration bars and muttering about the cold. Sharma stayed awake, watching the valley through glass. Her instincts hummed, that quiet internal signal honed by years of ambushes and silence before violence. And then she saw it. Movement, not near the compound, behind them. Figures, three, no lights, no sound moving up the ridge. Her breath slowed. She reached for her sidearm, nudging Ray's with her elbow. Don't move. 3 contacts approaching from our 6. He froze, chewing stopped mid-bite. The radio crackled suddenly, the same voice as before. Observation, this is command. Confirm all personnel in visual range. Her gut twisted. Wrong question. Negative, she whispered into the mic. Possible hostiles approaching our. The rest was drowned out by gunfire. Bullets tore through the night, slamming into rock. Rays went down with a cry. Sparks erupted from the comm array. Down, Sharma shouted, dragging the wounded corporal behind cover. The others scrambled, confused, shouting into broken comms. The ridge lit up with muzzle flashes. Dust and stone filled the air. Sharma's world slowed. Years of conditioning took over. Her breathing steadied. Her eyes tracked the direction of fire, triangulating by echo, flash, rhythm. She rose to a crouch, sighted and squeezed twice. 2 flashes disappeared. Move, she barked. Fall back to vehicle. They scrambled down the slope, half sliding on gravel. She carried Rays by his vest, her muscles burning. Bullets whined past her ear, tearing through the sand. The truck loomed below Salvation, if they could reach it. A grenade exploded behind them, a concussive wave knocking her off balance. She hit the ground hard, ears ringing. Through the haze, she saw a figure cresting the ridge, dark clothing, local armor, a suppressed rifle. He moved like someone trained. She fired once, twice, he dropped. She didn't stop to confirm. She dragged Rays the rest of the way, shoving him into the truck as the others covered the retreat. The engine roared to life. The vehicle tore across the desert, wheels kicking up a storm of sand. Command, this is observation team, she yelled into the damaged radio. We're under attack, repeat, compromised position. Static, then a voice she didn't recognize. Negative observation, you were never there. The transmission cut. Her stomach went cold. She stared at the radio, heart pounding. Then she said, almost to herself, they set us up. Hours later, the truck's lights cut through the black dunes like knives. They stopped in the shadow of an abandoned airstrip, a skeleton of rust and silence. Rays was bleeding but alive. The others were shaken, wide-eyed, silent. What do we do now? One asked. Sharma looked toward the horizon, empty, endless. We do what we always do, she said. We survive. She moved to the tailgate, checking her rifle, replacing the mag with quiet precision. Somewhere deep inside, the old part of her, the part that once wore the Kestrel patch, woke again. The system had sent her here to vanish, to close a loop they couldn't control. But they'd forgot what happens when the prey learns how to hunt back. How do you erase someone who's already erased herself? That's what they forgot to ask before they sent her to die again. The desert night was absolute, cold enough to steal breath, black enough to hide angels and monsters alike. In that darkness, Anna Sharma sat beside the ruined airstrip, watching the horizon through the cracked windshield of the truck. Her team slept fitfully in the back, exhaustion replacing fear. She hadn't closed her eyes once. Every muscle hummed with the old familiarity of betrayal. The kind that comes not from enemies, but from the people who stamped your name on a file, called you asset, then tried to make you disappear when the numbers didn't balance. The radio sat silent on the dash. Dead frequency, no signal. She replayed the last transmission in her mind. You were never there. That tone, calm, official, unshakably certain, was the voice of a system pretending morality was paperwork. She knew what came next. Cleanup. Erasure. They wouldn't risk exposure, not for a handful of ghosts in the sand. But what they didn't understand, what they never learned, was that people like her don't fade quietly. They adapt, they remember. She checked her rifle again, fingers moving by instinct. Her breath fogged faintly in the cold. Somewhere far in the east, the sky was beginning to pale. The others stirred awake. Ray's groaned, clutching his side. The wound was bad but not fatal. The rest, two rookies barely out of training, looked to her with hollow eyes. "What do we do?" one whispered. She looked out at the horizon. "We finish it." "Finish what?" "The mission." They stared at her like she was mad. "The mission was observation," one protested. "Command just tried to kill us." Sharma stood, slinging her rifle over her shoulder. "Exactly, which means whatever's under that compound is worth dying for." Ray's coughed, voice hoarse. "You're saying we go back?" She met his eyes. "I'm saying we don't run from people who already wrote our obituaries." For a moment no one moved. Then Ray's gave a short, pained laugh. "Hell, if we're ghosts, might as well haunt someone before we're gone." She nodded once, that was enough. They moved before sunrise. The convoy, one half-crippled truck, two wounded men. One woman who refused to break rolled silent through the dunes. Sharma navigated by instinct. The wind had erased their tracks overnight, but her mind held the land's map like a scar. By dawn the compound loomed again, a scar of concrete buried beneath sand. The same vents shimmered in the heat. She left the others with the truck and moved forward alone. Crawling low, she crossed the open stretch, her boots silent on powder-fine sand. When she reached the outer wall, she pressed her ear to the stone. Faint vibrations, machinery beneath. She found the vent again, pried open the rusted grate and slipped inside. The air inside was hot, stale, humming with power. A tunnel ran downward into shadow, lined with pipes and dust. She moved silently, counting steps, her senses drinking in every sound. The hum grew louder until it resolved into a rhythmic pulse generators. She dropped into a maintenance shaft, her boots landing soundlessly on concrete. The tunnel opened into a vast underground chamber. Rows of crates, computers, weapons, and men not insurgents, not locals, Americans. Her stomach turned. They weren't tracking weapons. They were moving them, funding operations that weren't supposed to exist. She realized then this wasn't about national security. It was about silence, about keeping secrets profitable. A sound behind her. She spun, rifle up. A figure stepped into the dim light. The same man who'd briefed her, the one who'd told her the mission was simple. "Didn't expect you to make it this far," he said, voice calm, almost admiring. "You always did have a survival problem." She didn't lower her weapon. "You lied." He shrugged. "Everyone lies. Some of us just get paid to do it better." Her eyes narrowed. "You used my name to clean up your mess." He smiled faintly. "Your name was already dirty. We just gave it purpose again." For a heartbeat, silence. Then movement. Two armed guards stepped from the shadows, rifles leveled. Sharma didn't hesitate. 3 shots cracked through the chamber. The first 2 guards dropped before their muzzles even flashed. The third, the man in fatigues, barely flinched. He stepped sideways, calm, predatory. "Always so direct," he said. "That's why they keep pulling you back, Kestrel. You make killing look like truth." Her jaw clenched. "And you make truth look like paperwork." She fired again, but he was already gone, ducking behind a stack of crates. Bullets screamed past her head. She moved low, fast, rolling behind a pillar. The echoes turned the chamber into chaos, ricochets, smoke, shouted commands. But she'd fought in worse places. And she'd survived every time they told her she wouldn't. She moved like a shadow, her breathing slow, deliberate. One step, one heartbeat, one shot. When the echo faded, silence returned, heavy and absolute. She approached the crates, rifle up. The man lay half buried in sand and dust, blood soaking through his shirt. He coughed, a dry, ugly sound. "You think this changes anything?" he rasped. She knelt, pressing the muzzle to his chest. "No," she said, "that's why it matters." He stared at her, eyes dimming. "You can't kill the system, Kestrel." She looked down at him, voice quiet as a prayer. "I don't have to, I just have to make sure it remembers me." Then she stood and walked away. Outside, the sun was rising. The compound behind her burned, flames licking skyward, black smoke spiraling into the blue. Reyes and the others waited near the ridge, their faces pale in the dawn light. "Is it done?" one asked. She looked at the plume. It started. They drove in silence for hours. The radio remained dead. No signals, no contact, just the hum of the engine and the endless expanse of desert swallowing every trace of what had happened. When they reached the highway, a convoy of armored vehicles appeared on the horizon, unmarked, moving fast. "Command?" Reyes asked, panic creeping in. Sharma shook her head. "Number cleanup." He gripped the wheel. "Then what?" "Keep driving," she said. The trucks closed the distance. Dust clouds rose behind them like ghosts. At the last moment, she reached for the door handle. "Wait, what are you doing?" Reyes shouted. She looked at him, calm, resolute, ending it. Then she jumped. The desert swallowed her. The convoy thundered past, chasing the truck. None of them noticed the figure already vanishing into the dunes. That night, a weather satellite caught the faint heat signature of a single human crossing the salt flats, heading west. No ID, no trail. By morning, the signature was gone. Weeks later, in a small roadside village across the border, a woman with dark hair and quiet eyes rented a room under a different name. She never used her phone. She worked fixing machinery. She lived like a ghost who'd made peace with her haunting. But sometimes, at night, when the wind howled across the sand, she'd look up at the stars and see mountains instead. And the memory would return, the sound of snow under boots, the silence before the shot, the look on a man's face when he realized the person he'd mocked could carry him through hell. She didn't hate them anymore. Not Miller, not Rostova, not even the ones who tried to erase her. She learned something colder, sharper. That dignity doesn't scream, it doesn't beg. It just keeps walking. Months later, a sealed report landed on Captain Rostova's desk at FOB Dagger. No sender, no return stamp, just a manila folder, thin and light. Inside were a few photographs, a burning desert compound, coordinates, and a note written in simple handwriting. For the ones who still remember what duty means. Rostova stared at it for a long time. Then she looked out toward the peaks that framed her base, silent and endless. "Godspeed, Kestrel," she whispered. Somewhere far from uniforms and orders, a woman walked alone across the desert at sunset. Her shadow stretched long and thin over the sand. And for the first time in years, she wasn't running or fighting or surviving. She was simply moving forward. Because strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just endures quietly, fiercely, endlessly. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.